Hey guys, so our next topic is the argumentative essay. So let's go through what we have on the poster and then we'll get into some more details. Alright, first thing I have is fiction or nonfiction. The state test can give you either one of these with an argumentative essay. Now with some of the other types of essays, they're easy to recognize because they'll only give you fiction or they'll only give you nonfiction for certain ones. But again, argumentative, it can be either one. So that makes us wonder, okay, how are we going to recognize when we have an argumentative essay? What is the prompt going to look like? Well, it's a lot easier to recognize than you may think. If you see something about it's asking you to take a stance on an issue or to make a claim and a counterclaim, anything like that, it's going to be argumentative. However, there's a loophole to that. You have to be sure that it is asking you to make a claim. If it is asking you, the writer, to create something, to create a stance and argue yourself, argue a point, then it's argumentative. However, a lot of times people get tricked because they will see a prompt that says, okay, you have been given two argumentative essays. Read them both and analyze each essay's point. Analyze each essay's stance, their claims. Well, that's not asking you to create your own stance. It's not asking you to create a claim. It's asking you to evaluate two different claims. If it's not asking you to make one, it's not argumentative. So to recognize whether or not you have an argumentative prompt when you get your essays is to look at the words here. Just like everything else, you need to analyze the words. If the prompt is asking you, the writer, to create a stance, to make a claim, to discuss a counterclaim, if it's asking you to create your own claim, it is argumentative. However, if it is only asking you to evaluate someone else's claim, like for example, if they give you two argumentative essays, your passages are two argumentative essays, and they say read both sides of the argument and analyze both sides of the argument, evaluate the author's claims, then you're not writing argumentative. That would actually fall into the informational category. So it's only argumentative if they're asking you to read something and create your opinion. Now remember, just because it's asking you to create a claim and to create your opinion, you still never say, I think da 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 da. You don't do that. So you wouldn't say, I think that schools should not have school uniforms. You would just state it as if it was fact. Schools should not have school uniforms. It's a lot stronger that way. When you start putting in these phrases like I think and I believe and according to what my beliefs are, things like that, it makes your essay seem weak, and you're not supposed to use first person anyway. We're not in a narrative, so you're not going to use first person. So the second thing that I have here, the prompt is going to center around choosing a stance, making a claim, and supporting it. Now, what do you need to support that? How do you support your claim? Well, you pull evidence from the passage that they gave you. So, your next thing, evidence needed. We just discussed that. Those are your quotes. If you write an argumentative essay and you have no quotes to back up your stance and no quotes to back up your counterclaim, you have not written an argumentative essay. You've just written a paper with your opinion on it. That doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't do any good. You have to have evidence to support your argument or you've got nothing. Your next point here, paragraphs. 4 to 5 paragraphs minimum. Now, we discussed how with a literary analysis you can get away with 3 paragraphs sometimes. Well, with an argumentative you can't. The bare minimum is going to be 4 paragraphs. And I'm going to go through a sample outline and show you why you can't do less than four paragraphs. Okay? A little change of venue here. Sometimes I get bored of standing in front of my gray wall looking at a poster. So now we're in the smart car. So let's go for a little ride and talk about argumentative essays while we're in the smart car. Random thought about argumentative writing. Remember, your goal here is to convince your reader to believe whatever you are arguing. So if you are an effective arguer, then those reasons will be very persuasive. But remember, you can't just throw out random things and say, well, the reader should agree with me because I think it's the right thing to do. That's not going to be strong enough. So don't just try to stick to, oh, well, it's the right thing to do and it's what people should do. That's not a compelling argument. You want to always make sure that your argument makes sense and it is convincing. Your goal is to render the other side of the argument completely speechless. You want to try to figure out what their argument is and what they're going to say before they ever actually say it. If you can do that, if you can determine what the other side is going to say, which is what your counterclaim is for, and then you can go ahead and prove it wrong before they ever have a chance to even argue with you, you have now won the argument. So that is your goal. That's always your goal for an argumentative essay. Your counterclaim is where you're going to start proving the other argument wrong. Now, you don't want to just say the opposing argument is wrong and leave it at that. That doesn't tell me anything. So instead, I'm going to say the opposing argument is incorrect because, and whatever my reasons are. Just because you're writing an argumentative essay doesn't mean that you want to be accusatory or too judgmental to the point where you actually offend your audience. That has happened before, where people get so fired up about their topic that they almost are so opinionated that it is offensive. Remember, you don't have a machine that's going to be judging your essay. It's going to be read and scored and graded by actual people. So you need to remember, these people are going to have opinions about subjects just like you do. So you want to be sensitive to the other side, but you still want to prove them wrong. But always remember, you don't want to be offensive. You don't want to say things that will offend groups of people. You don't want to use stereotypes and slang and facts that are not able to actually be proven. You don't want to use opinions that are not able to be backed up. You want to always make sure that what you're saying has validity, it has truth, and that it is convincing and persuasive. Okay, so the final thing I want to discuss with argumentative essays is the basic outline. Now, this is just, like I said, a basic outline. It doesn't have an annotation for what every single one of your sentences will be, but it does tell you what each paragraph and the pieces of the paragraph will be about. Okay, so let's start at the top here. Okay, so let's talk about what your introduction for an argumentative essay will have in it. Obviously, you're going to have an intro sentence. You just need to open up the argument, state what the argument is, state both sides of the argument. Don't go into too much detail. Don't give away your reasons or your quotes or anything yet. But like, let's say my argument was about school uniforms. The prompt has asked me to pick a stance on whether or not students should be forced to wear school uniforms every day to school. Well, in the beginning of my intro, I'm just going to state the problem. Wearing school uniforms is a controversial issue in our society today. There are many opinions to this topic, and just keep going from there. Just let it snowball. After the beginning of your first paragraph, when you have already addressed what both sides of the argument are, then you will lead down into your thesis statement. Now, in an argumentative essay and in argumentative prompts, they may not call it a thesis statement. They may call it a claim. It's the exact same thing. So if you see the word claim and if you see the word thesis, they go together with argumentative essays. So your claim, aka your thesis statement, will say what your side of the argument is. Whatever you're going to argue for or against needs to be in your thesis, your claim, and it needs to be very clear. So in the beginning of the first paragraph, when you set up the argument, we shouldn't know yet what side you're going to argue, but before your first paragraph is completely finished, your reader should have absolutely no doubt where you're going in the rest of your essay. Now, after you've done that, you're going to move to paragraph 2. Now, what I've given you here is a basic argumentative essay with only 4 paragraphs outlined. Now, remember from the other chart, I said that an argumentative essay could be 4 or 5 paragraphs. But remember, how many is the absolute minimum? 4 for argumentative. Now, the reason that you cannot get away with just 3 paragraphs like you can with, say, a literary analysis, is because the argumentative essay has something extra, and that would be your counterclaim down here. We'll get to that in just a second. But before you get to the counterclaim, after your thesis, you're going to give your evidence to support whatever you are arguing. So here, I stated my stance. And remember, I don't say I think or I believe. I just state it like it's fact. So again, if we're talking about school uniforms, and my argument is I have one article that is against school uniforms, And then I have one article that is for school uniforms, and my prompt to go with these two articles says, read the following passages, choose a side, make a claim, and support your claim with evidence. So I've made my claim here. I'm going to argue against. Students should not have to wear school uniforms because, and then come up with your reasons. Now in paragraph 2, I'm going to give my quotes, my evidence as to why I think students should not have to wear school uniforms. So like I already stated, when you get to paragraph 2 and you're ready to start putting your evidence into your paragraph to support the claim that you made at the end of paragraph 1, you need to make sure you're pulling these quotes from the right place. You can't just make stuff up. Believe it or not, I have actually seen students go into a state test or any kind of standardized test, and when they need a quote, they make it up. They just come up with a sentence and then they put quotations around it. They cite it and it's just somebody's fake name, and they call that a quote because they don't think anybody's going to notice. I have actually seen somebody do that. Well, that's not a good decision, y'all. Think about it. The test people have given you 2 passages. So obviously, where are they expecting your evidence to come from? These 2 passages. If it comes from anywhere else, then it's not going to count. It's not going to be evidence that works. It's not relevant to your argument. It has to come from here. So if I'm arguing against school uniforms, okay, but my state test gave me one passage that supports, one passage that is against. Follow me so far? Okay. When I get here and I want to support that I'm arguing against it, I need to give my evidence, because you see here under paragraph 2, we have intro sentence. Then we will have a quote, our first quote with analysis. Then we'll have our second quote with analysis. And then we're going to have our concluding sentence. Now, when I get to this quote, when I'm ready for this, I can't make it up out of thin air. I go to my passage that I was provided, the one that agrees with me, which is this one down here, against school uniforms. I'm going to read this passage, and I'm going to find at least one quote somewhere in there that supports what I believe as to why students should not have to wear uniforms. Now, I'm still not ever going to say I believe or I think. I'm just going to state it like it's fact. So that's where I'm going to get my first quote, right there. Okay, now I'm ready to go to my second quote. Well, where am I going to get it from? Am I still in the same paragraph? Yeah. So am I still talking about the same topic? Yeah. So where does it come from? It comes from passage 2 again. So I go back over here, I find me a second quote that also, again, agrees with what I'm saying. These 2 quotes need to be different. Don't use the same quote twice. Don't use 2 sentences that are talking about identically the same topic. They need to be 2 separate reasons, 2 separate pieces that support your overall claim. All right? Now, once you have gotten through that, now it's time for the counterclaim. This is why you can't have less than 4 paragraphs in an argumentative essay, because you know you always have to have an introductory paragraph, you always have to have a conclusion paragraph, and you're always going to have at least 1 paragraph supporting your claim. But the one thing that an argumentative essay has to have that none of the other essays have to is the counterclaim. Now, when people fail argumentative essays, it's usually because of that paragraph right there, because they don't know how to properly form a counterclaim. They don't know what to do with it. I'm going to say something like this. The opposing side to this argument would say, and then I'm going to go through what I believe an opposing argument would say. Well, a lot of people then go, well, I don't know what they would say. I don't agree with them. So, of course, I don't know what their reasons are. Yes, you do. And if you're 100% not sure, where can you get it from? Hello, passage 1. You got it right there. They've already given you a passage that supports the argument. This is against what you're saying, so can't you use that in your counterclaim? Yeah, you should. That they're expecting you to. So when I get to my quotes here, and I need to start explaining what the other side believes, and then I'm going to prove them wrong, I'm going to go to passage 1. I'm going to pull out a quote from here that goes against what I'm saying, and I'm going to put it right here. Okay? So, intro sentence to bring in the opposing argument, explain opposing argument, and then you give a quote with analysis. Very simple. Now you can, remember, you have to have 2 quotes in each of your body paragraphs. You can do that in a couple of different ways. So if you want to have 2 quotes here that are supporting the counterclaim, that are going against what you say, going against your claim, if you want to put 2 quotes for that, you can. Or you can use 1 quote for that and then use your second paragraph quote for your rebuttal. All right, and we'll get to rebuttal in a second. Okay, so to recap, counterclaim. I'm going to give an intro sentence, and the opposing side to this argument would be, and then give a brief explanation of that. Find a quote from the first passage or whatever passage is against your original claim. Go to that passage, pull a piece of evidence that is supporting the counterclaim. Put it in here, and before you go any further, now you have to say why it's wrong. This assumption is incorrect because, and then you've got to prove them wrong. That is what you call the rebuttal. Because you can't just state the opposing side and just say, oh, this is what other people might believe, so what, and you leave it alone. Well, then you haven't done anything. You haven't argued. You need to state the other side and then tell us why is it wrong. Because remember, the most effective way to argue is to anticipate what the other side is going to say before they ever get a chance to say it, prove them wrong before they ever get a chance to say it, and then you've rendered them speechless. Remember, just because we're not writing a literary analysis essay and we're writing an argumentative, it doesn't mean that you don't still have to analyze. You do. So let me get you a closer look at this outline here. Okay? So let's recap. Paragraph 1, introduction, your thesis statement. That is also known as your claim. Paragraph 2, this is the paragraph that supports your argument. So I would go to whatever passage they gave me that agreed with my claim, agreed with my argument. I would pull 2 quotes from that to support what I'm saying, and I would analyze them. Remember, analyzation does not mean you just say, this is important and this is a true fact. No, you have to analyze. Why is it important? How is it important? What does it mean? You have to go way beyond just what the quote says. Now, after I've given my 2 quotes here, now I give my concluding sentence. After that, I move to my counterclaim. Counterclaim is not complete if you do not have a rebuttal. The first thing you're going to do is give your intro sentence to bring in the opposing argument, because before you start quoting and trying to prove the opposing argument wrong, you need to state what the opposing argument is. Then you want to give a quote that supports that counterclaim. I would get that from the other passage they gave me that disagreed with my overall claim. I'm going to pull that quote. I'm going to analyze it. That way my reader knows exactly what the counterclaim would say. There is no confusion about it. And then after I do that, what do I do now? Well, now I got to prove them wrong. So this is all going to come out of my head. This is not something I'm going to be able to just find on the piece of paper. You need to come up with something to say, all right, well, these counterclaims are incorrect, and here's why. If you want to work in your second quote there, you can. Or if you wanted to have 2 quotes here, you can. This is up to you. All right? Now, once you have done that, give your concluding sentence and close that paragraph out. Your very last paragraph, obviously, will be your conclusion. In your conclusion, the first sentence needs to be your restated thesis. Now, we talked about restated thesis statements yesterday. Remember how to do that? All you do is take your thesis statement, flip it upside down. So if my original claim, my original thesis was students should not have to wear school uniforms, then I would now say school uniforms rob children of their individuality, and therefore students should not be forced to wear them every day. Something like that. I'm just restating what I've already said. Then you want to make sure you have a powerful thought at the end. This is your last chance to convince your reader. That's it. Once they are through reading this paragraph, you've either convinced them or you haven't. And if you didn't convince them, if you did not get your reader to agree with you and see your side, you have not done your job. So you need to think, all right, if I was someone hearing about this for the first time, what would I need to hear that would persuade me? What could they say that would make me believe them? That's what you need to say. Leave your reader with a powerful thought. Guys, that's all there is to an argumentative essay. You can do this. Usually people get intimidated when they get an argumentative essay because it does entail a few more details that the other types of essays don't have, like the counterclaim and the rebuttal and things like that. But you can do this. Remember, as long as you're supporting your opinion, as long as you are giving evidence that is relevant and it makes sense and you're explaining your point as best you can, you're going to be fine. But even if you give me an amazing thesis statement and you give an amazing second paragraph that supports your claim and everything is just rock solid, but you don't include the counterclaim with a rebuttal, you automatically fail. Remember, that's one of those things that can get your papers, your essay, put into the I'm not going to grade this file because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't follow the prompt. A lot of people will fail this test because they're not going to give a counterclaim on their argumentative. Up until this point, if you've ever written persuasive essays, you probably have never had to do counterclaims before. You've probably just had to write an essay that explained your opinion and support that, which is fine. But remember, with the state test, you've got to have that counterclaim. It's one of the most important things in this essay. As long as you can do all of those things, if you have your intro, your claim, which is your thesis statement, the paragraph supporting your claim, a counterclaim with a rebuttal, and then a conclusion, you're good to go. Now, a while back I said you could do 4 or 5 paragraphs for this essay. You should understand why now you can't get away with less than 4. So this was just 4 paragraphs. Now, the way that this would turn into 5 is if I had, for some reason, two different reasons to support my overall claim, and I wanted them to be in separate paragraphs, that's fine too. So you would just take this paragraph and split it into 2. You can do that. But it's up to you. If you feel like you can fit it all in that one paragraph and it's going to be enough to convince your reader, that's fine. Because remember, at the end of the day, your goal with the state test is to be accurate, be efficient, but to be quick. If you take too much time reading through the passages, or if you take too much time planning your essay, then your time's going to run out and you won't have finished, which means you'll what? You'll fail. We don't want you to fail. So you need to be able to go through this stuff very quickly. That's why these sample outlines are so important for you to know. And if you can walk into that state test, know this outline, know this blueprint, and know exactly what your argumentative essay, your literary essay, all of those things need to look like, you're going to cut your time down tremendously. Okay, so our next topic is the argumentative essay. So let's take a look at what we have here. Why is argumentative down there? Well, you can't see it. Hang on, I need to move it because you can't see it right now. So in that case, where it's just asking me to evaluate them, it would actually be informational. Madeline, you cannot scream while I'm doing a video. You cannot do that. No, you can't do that because if you scream, it's going to mess up my video and now I have to start all over. Hush. Hush your beak. Hush your beak. Okay, so our next topic is the argumentative essay. So let's go through the guidelines and the basics real quick. So fiction or nonfiction. The state test, oh my God, where are my words today? What is wrong with my words? So they can give you fiction or nonfiction with an argumentative essay. Now, you have to be careful about these though. Make sure you know how to recognize an argumentative essay prompt. Most of the time, you can recognize them by seeing words like, now my dang poster's falling off the wall. This is not a good day for making videos, apparently. Ugh. Have to stay up. Do not come down again. Do not come down again. So with an argumentative essay, you can be given fiction or... You've got to be kidding me right now. You got to be kidding me.